Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to another video. Now today I'm going to be addressing some of the biggest questions going into week 4. Now in these past 3 weeks of football, we have had some crazy ongoings. Some teams getting 70 points dropped on their head, some big upsets, some big questions about star players potentially moving on from their teams after a rough start. And one of those players, Patrick Surtain. Patrick Surtain has been a great corner these past few years, top tier, elite. And with the way Denver is looking, we can start to see perhaps that they'll dismantle a lot of their best players. And I think the first person to go would be Patrick Surtain. Obviously not because he's underperforming. It's because they are heading for the rebuild stage. And, Denver has really set themselves up in an odd situation. I don't think they thought things through very well. I mean, you bring in Russell Wilson on a terrible contract. It's awful. And it's a contract you can't get rid of. And now you bring him into a team that's just, it's not all there. I mean, you've got some pieces, but it's just not there. And then they like to, their front office, it just seems like they're very impulsive, the way they just throw their money at big guys, or not even big guys, but just they overpay decent players. We understand that you have the money to do that, but that's not always the best. And like I said, they've set themselves up in just a bad situation. I mean, you trade for Russell Wilson. You finished top 5 of worst teams in the NFL last year, and the Seattle Seahawks have your first round pick. And that's where they went wrong. They didn't lay a foundation before bringing in Russell Wilson or bringing in any of these other guys. And that's what a team is. You have to have a foundation before you start using your money. And, we can sit here and dog the Russell Wilson trade. I'm not going to, because everyone said it was a good trade once it happened. But, because not saying that it was a good trade, but Russell Wilson wasn't the Russell Wilson we see now when he got traded. So, woulda, coulda, shoulda on that one. I still think that you could have brought him into a better scenario or built around him in much better management. But in regards to Patrick Surtain, like I said, he's been one of the best corners we've seen these past few years. Just great, all areas of the ball. And some teams that I see him going to, my personal favorite for his destination, Dallas. Now, Dallas, they're going to lose Trevon Diggs for the whole season. That's a huge blow. And we saw what that defense looks like when you've got an aging veteran in Stephon Gilmore at your DB1. It wasn't the best. There was a lot of holes. It would really help that D to have a guy like Patrick Surtain in there. And I think because, Dallas is still a good team. I know they got upset by the Arizona Cardinals, which I was going to make a video on, but I was sick. They got upset. That happens. They're still a good team. And I think having a guy like Patrick Surtain will go a long way, especially with a guy like Stephon Gilmore who's not going to be in your long-term plans. So now you're trading for Surtain, but he's not some one-year rental. You're going to keep him, you're going to extend him, and you're going to have Trevon Diggs next year. Like I said, Stephon Gilmore won't be in your long-term plans, but he will be for this season. So that's still a major piece to have on your defense to coincide with Surtain. The other destination I see, and this has been a hot spot for so many reasons these past few weeks, Miami. That team is something to watch. That I'm sure everyone knows that they scored 70 points against the Denver Broncos in 2 weeks. The past 2 weeks they've been just the most electrifying offense we've seen. They've got Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle. It's just Tua's having a field day with those deep threats and the secondaries of other teams. It's a hot spot to go right now. I think it would be kind of funny to see that the Denver Broncos lose by 50 against the Miami Dolphins and then they trade their best corner. That would be pretty funny. Outside of that irony, it could work. I just think Miami has they're just not ready to make a big move yet, a big splash. And this deal wouldn't even happen until the deadline mark. I don't see it happening anytime soon because we're only 4 weeks into the season. There's still things to figure out. I mean, we could see Miami and they're 9-7 or 9-8 by the end of the year. Just things change. So this will all start to heat up. All these trade talks could be premature. I've seen one other team floated around there, and that's the 49ers. It would look good on paper. Obviously, it would look good on paper. San Fran, best, I think, personally, and this sucks because I'm an Arizona Cardinal fan. I don't want to say this, and I don't want to admit it. The San Francisco 49ers are the best team in the National Football League right now. That's because they've just, every week, they show up. They've got a killer defense, and their offense is superb. And that's, with every other team who's projected to be the best in the league, like Miami, like Kansas City, like Dallas, you've got a really strong side of the ball, and then you've got your holes. Well, San Francisco's doing what LA did, and they're putting all their chips on the table to win this season. Could they, in fact, do that same thing with Patrick Surtain? I don't know. I don't know if the contracts will work out. I mean, they have some people to pay. We saw they paid Nick Bosa. I don't know how they're going to manage that cap situation. Like I said, it's the idea of putting all your chips on the table for one Super Bowl. They're definitely not setting themselves up for a future, and it could go. It makes sense with the way they're managing their team, but then again, it could just be impossible due to the implications of trading a guy like Surtain. Now, another big piece of trade talk, this is going to the other side of the ball on offense, and this is centered around a certain shot caller who's had a good start to the season, but his team is not doing very well, and that is Kirk Cousins. Kirk Cousins has been he's looking good. He's finding his receivers, a number one position rank on fantasy. Just they're off to a bad start. I mean, they've been extremely unlucky. Close games. Even the Philly game was fairly close. They've just lost some bummers. Is it time to press the panic button for this Minnesota team? I don't think so. I mean, teams have started out 0-3, and they've been just fine. It's not time to press the panic button because they have a good roster. They don't have, lots of holes. I mean, they have Justin Jefferson, the best receiver in the National Football League. They've got Kirk Cousins, an experienced quarterback, a veteran quarterback. Do I think he's one of the best? No. But he can get the job done if given the right opportunity. I don't know what's going on with this team. They just can't seem to figure it out. They can't seem to make it click. But it's not time to press the panic button just yet. But with Kirk Cousins, you don't really have. There's a time window with a guy like Kirk, even though he's great. Not great. He's a really good, solid quarterback. His age is a factor, and to have a guy like him not be where you want this season, it might be time to press that restart button. But like I said, it's still fairly early on in the season. And just him getting traded during this season alone is ridiculous to me. Now, obviously, all the talk is around him going to New York because of the situation there with Zach Wilson. That's just not going to happen. A guy like Patrick Surtain, you can flip him during the deadline. Not a quarterback. A quarterback's got to, he's the shot caller. He's going to be under center. He's got to learn that system. If a team would trade for him, it would be really taking 2 steps back. 1 step forward, 2 steps back. And he's not a guy you want to build a future around. So the whole premise of that trade, very, very unlikely. I sloughed it off at first, but I guess for some reason it's really picking up traction. I would tell people just don't buy it. It's not going to happen. New York, the Jets, they're obviously not satisfied with Zach Wilson. The coaching staff got his support, or they got his support, I should say. Obviously, there's some turmoil in that locker room due to that factor. But, what else are you going to do? You bring in Trevor Siemian, that's not really doing much. And, the Jets have got such a good team. They've got some really good pieces, and obviously those pieces were brought in for Aaron Rodgers, and he went down. That sucks. But I don't know. The idea of bringing a veteran quarterback, it just seems very unlikely that you can get a bridge guy other than the likes of someone like Trevor Siemian or maybe a Colt McCoy or someone out there to get you potentially squeak into the playoffs. It's just an unfortunate situation, and I think without Aaron Rodgers, there's nothing they can do. They're not trading for Kirk Cousins. I don't think they can. But yeah, I guess with this situation, you just gotta hope and pray that either Wilson could pick it up, Siemian could pick it up, something. Rodgers ain't coming back. So if that team goes to waste this year, that's unfortunate. I know there was a lot of hype and a lot of excitement around that team, which the Jets fans haven't had for a long time. Another star player that could be on the move is T. Higgins. Now, T. Higgins hasn't had the best start to the season. He had one really solid game where it looked like he was back in his full form, especially after that Week 1 performance of, I think it was 8 targets and 0 catches. T. Higgins is still a fundamental piece to the Cincinnati Bengals offense, and therefore I don't find it likely that he even gets dealt at the deadline. Even though they said he was not in their long-term plans, Cincinnati is still a contender. They need T. Higgins. He's, like I said, a fundamental piece to their offense. T. Higgins, don't see him being shipped off at the deadline or any time before that. But they said that, obviously the re-sign did not happen, and that stirred up some big talks of him not returning to Cincinnati, which would be a big blow. But, with that, Chase and Burrow, you got a lot of mouths to feed money-wise, and sometimes you just got to cut your losses with even some good guys like T. Higgins, and he's more than just a good guy. I think he could be a number 1 receiver on a lot of teams. One of those teams could be the New York Giants. New York Giants just have struggled real bad. And, they had their one little cheap victory over the Arizona Cardinals. As a Cardinal fan, that made me extremely mad. But, they go up against solid teams, and they just get shellacked. They get embarrassed. And it's looking like Danny Dimes isn't the guy they thought, isn't the guy you wanted to pay $40 million to. And that's what I've been saying all along. Daniel Jones was not qualified, worthy of a $40 million contract, and now you're stuck with that for, I think, the next 2 years. But if you look at their offense, when Barkley goes down, there's no one else to go to outside of maybe Darren Waller. Darren Waller is the bright spot to that offense. It's not Matt Breida. It's not Darius Slayton. That offense is just that the pass catching crew is just not very good. And that's not what they were built for. I mean, their whole system surrounds Saquon Barkley, and when he goes down, you have to ask Daniel Jones to step up, and he just doesn't. But a guy like T. Higgins would go a long way in that offense. He's a big body, which they need extremely bad, and he would just automatically number one receiver and would add a lot of talent, much needed talent to that Giants offense. And same goes for the Carolina Panthers. Now, I like this destination a lot. This is, with Bryce Young, and there's been some doubts about Bryce Young. I don't think so. It's way too early on in the season. There's just been some questions and concerns because of how well his peers have done that were drafted after him in the draft. C.J. Stroud is having an outstanding season so far. Anthony Richardson has had a pretty solid couple games before he went down. So there's a lot of pressure on Bryce Young with him being the number one overall pick. But you got to remember, Carolina is not in the best situation right now. Outside of Miles Sanders, they've got a lot of holes on that wide receiving core. They gave up DJ Moore to get Bryce Young. So, Bryce Young's not working with the best. And, at least you could say C.J. Stroud has got some weapons. He's got Tank Dell, Nico Collins, those guys. I don't know if those guys are just really good or C.J. Stroud just knows how to make them work. But I think we'll see Bryce Young start to pick it up as the season goes on. And next year, if you like where your team's at and you're still missing a number one guy, T. Higgins will be a safe blanket for a young quarterback going into his sophomore year in Bryce Young. Just the same way Lamar has Mark Andrews, or just you take any other, how Baker Mayfield has Mike Evans. Having T. Higgins as Bryce Young's number one target would go a long way for that Carolina offense. Well, I guess we'll have to see what goes on week 4. I mean, there's still a lot of questions to answer. It's going to be a little interesting to see. There's going to just, we got a great game going on against Denver and Chicago. Can't wait to see that, 0-3. It's going to decide who goes 1-16 on the season. But I don't know. Like I said, a lot of questions to answer. I think it's going to be an exciting week. So that's all I have to say. Thank you and have a good rest of your day.